Well, welcome to, I don't even know what episode we're on, what, 37 of Wrinkled Wisdom podcast. Today we're sitting down with Susan Rice.
I love the podcast.
We're going to try and get some wisdom out of Susan today.
I think all you're going to get is wrinkles.
Yeah, we're excited. Yeah, I don't know about that. You know what's funny is that in your comedy, I think it's important to highlight your comedy career. We'll highlight that. And I love how you've captured your generation of the humor, and it's in being older, but it captures the younger audience. I love that. I've been looking at some of the comments and stuff in your comedy, and it's just great.
That's been the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah, like it's.
I mean, and I have never stopped doing stand-up since the day I started. So, it's been a big surprise that I have a lot of elderly people that come out to my shows, which is really lovely. But I have a lot of Gen Zs that come out too. And that surprises me. And they're so sweet because they just want to give me, they ask me, can I give you a hug? And it's because, or I wish you were my grandma.
Oh, that's so
sweet.
Sweet.
Or you remind me of my grandma, or you remind me of my auntie, or, I am a familiar.
Yeah.
And that is something that I had to age into.
For the people that want to watch some of your content and, build a relationship through your content, where can they find you coming up in the next month?
Oh, we're going to go there. Okay. Well, I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. And I'm doing, right now, I'm here in Spokane, in the 16th and 17th and 17th, 18th, 19th, I'm at Skyline Comedy in Wisconsin. I'll think of it. And now that you asked me, I can't remember the name.
No, that's all right. We'll put it on the.
It's in Wisconsin, and it's Skyline Comedy, and Appleton. Thank you, Appleton, Wisconsin, and then I come back to the Pacific Northwest for. I do a show at the Clinton Street Theater in Portland, Oregon.
Okay. And
then I go to the beach, and I'm going to do the Nehalem Performing Arts Center.
Oh, great!
And then I'm off to Houston for the Punchline.
Oh, that'll be fun at the Punchline in Houston.
I'm doing the Punchline.
I bet that's a good time.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been to Houston.
Yeah,
I used to work Houston all the time.
And then your social media is Funny Old Bag on Instagram and TikTok.
And
we'll put your profile links in the description.
Okay.
So people can find you.
I'm on Facebook too under Susan Rice Comedy with a Side Dish.
Okay.
But that's that's for the people that are still on Facebook. Nobody else is. Right. All the old people are still on Facebook.
And then you have some specials coming out. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I have an album coming out it's been shot, and it'll be shopped to different platforms, Hulu and a few others. It's called Silver Alert.
Silver Alert.
And then and that'll come out. I think it's going live on the 13th of May. And then I have a Don't Tell half-hour comedy special that's coming out early June.
Oh, great. That'll be a good way to start the summer for everybody.
Well, let's hope I can, for a minute, give some people a moment of laughter.
I love that. Especially as stressful as things are in life, like it's funny how people all generations turn to comedy. Like it's just, and even if they don't know that they need it, once they get accidentally introduced to it again, they normally dive right in and absorb it for a while, because it's just such a beauty.
Well, I've had a lot of people that have come out in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in the last month and a half, that wanted. They go, I needed this so bad.
Yeah.
I needed this so bad, and
Was that
vaudeville thrived during the Depression because people needed to step away from their troubles and their lack and their worry. So I don't want that to happen to anybody, but
I
hope I can help.
How long have you been a comedian?
43 years.
43 years professionally?
Mm-hmm.
But probably your whole life you were funny?
I was an actress for 9 years prior to that, a professional actress. For
Oh,
9
okay.
years, yeah. So I went to acting school and I came back to Oregon and I did theater there and I did some commercial stuff and then kind of petered out on that. But comedy was actually supposed to be a one-woman show. I'd written a one-woman show,
Oh, yeah.
but I was always sneaking down the hall to watch
Yeah.
Toady Fields and Jonathan Winters and Jack Parr and all, and the Tonight Show and all that,
Right.
all of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Where did your story start? When were you born and where were you born at?
Oh, God.
Wait, I know
Let's see.
that's my way of getting around to asking a woman
Well,
her
the-
age.
The wagons had just left town and I grew up in Longview, Washington.
Okay.
You said your folks were in timber. My grandfather had worked for Frederick Weyerhaeuser. And my grandfather was born, who lived right down the street from me, my grandma and my grandfather. He was born in 1874.
Wow.
And they were both Canadians. And he went to work for Frederick Weyerhaeuser, the original, when he was 16 years old. And then they moved him to Minnesota, and he built and ran the sawmill there, but he was also a logger and was in the woods for years and years.
Yeah.
And then they built the Weyerhaeuser out in Longview
Yeah.
in the mid-20s, and he came out to build the first sawmill and then supervise it. And so they were out there from 1927 on. And so I was my mom grew up in Minnesota in Longview, and then
Okay.
I grew up in Longview.
What was childhood like in Longview? Was it
was
booming at
great.
the time? Was it?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was, it was a very small city with outlying areas. I think we had less than 16,000 people. And that included all the Kelso. I mean, it was small. You could ride your bike downtown. You could ride your bike at night.
Yeah.
You knew your neighbors. It was a neighborhood. And I went to Ari Long High School. My mother had graduated the second class of Ari Long High School. And my brothers and sisters and I graduated from the same high school my mother graduated. So it was a small town feeling. It's much different now.
Right.
But yeah, I never wanted to end up there, but it was a great place to grow up.
Right. Did you always dream of being like a big screen or an actress, or like what drove you to see the world like bigger?
I never put a label on it when I was a kid, but I knew I would perform.
Yeah.
I just knew I did all the things. I wasn't that great at it. I was a little dreamer. I didn't really achieve a lot in high school, but I was quick.
I could see that.
And I just kind of, my parents were, you're going to college, this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm right for college. You
Right.
know? And so I tried it, but that's where I found acting when I went to school. And so they didn't, I said, I'm never going to pass my math class.
Right.
So just know that there's not a graduation that you have to worry about here.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
And I had a great director.
Yeah.
So, and that was just in Longview, Washington at Lower Columbia College.
Yeah.
And then
LCC or Lower Columbia College.
Yeah, LCC in Lower Columbia College. And we had a great theater, and we had a great theater program. We had a wonderful director. And then I went down to school in San Diego.
Where'd you go to school? San Diego State or?
Well, at the time, USIU was a international university that had started in 1968. They had bought a law school, and they took over this university, and they bought this university out in Scripps, and they had there was 3 major acting schools at that time. There was the American Academy in New York, there was the Playhouse in Pasadena, and then there was USIU. And they were ranked that way. And I got into New York, but I couldn't afford to go.
Right.
I mean, it was crazy. And I had somewhat of a scholarship, but USIU gave me a full ride.
Oh, good.
So I went down to San Diego, and in that short time from the time I got accepted to the time I got down there, they lost their law school out on Point Loma because they didn't have a library.
Oh.
So they moved all the performing arts kids out of this beautiful performing arts old building with a theater, had 3 theaters, had all these audition rooms and stuff like that. And moved us 32 miles out of school, out of San Diego, to Scripps. And I had no housing out there.
Yeah.
I had been planning on living down by the theater. And so I got down there, and now I had to find my way every morning, find a way out to Scripps, 32 miles out of the city. And that was grueling.
A grind.
It was. But I had great instructors. And it was really an intense school. But then it was purchased by the Arab nation, and they wanted all the Jewish kids out. I'm not Jewish,
Right.
but I had a nickname of Mitzi,
Oh,
and I was told that I needed to go.
isn't that crazy to think about?
Well, it was my first, this was 1970, the beginning of 74. And I had fought, I had marched against Vietnam. I had marched for women's rights. But it was my first real experience of discrimination.
Discrimination, yeah.
Truly. And to this day, if I run into somebody that went to USIU the same time I did, we had an incident at the school one day during the 7 Days War in Israel, and there were troops with guns on our campus.
Was it scary?
And they had rounded up all the Jewish kids, all the dancers, put them on buses, and sent them to the airport.
Was it to protect them or just get rid of them?
It's to get rid of them.
Oh, isn't that crazy?
And they went, okay, we're gone.
Yeah.
And it was weird. And there was nothing on the news about it ever. Nobody, because Scripps at that time was not developed. There was the Institute, but that was it.
Yeah.
There was nothing around there but this college that was in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And so the local news never covered it, nothing. But, so when I would run into somebody, I go, was I crazy? Did that happen?
Right.
And they go, no, it happened. Because I remember walking into the student union building, seeing this guy standing there with full Army gear, hand grenades and everything, and he's got a gun with ammo on his across his shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm going, are they filming something out here?
Oh, right.
I'm thinking, what's going on? I kind of thought, where's the movie crew?
Right.
No, it wasn't a fake.
It was real.
It was real. And I didn't find out that my scholarship had been canceled until I came back in January of 74.
Just because they assumed you were Jewish?
I was told, yeah. I was told they were looking at, I was a woman too.
Yeah.
So they were not to be educated.
Right.
So there was several reasons. And the fact that my father got a bill for $6,000 for tuition, and I had a full ride, and that's when I found out I'd lost my scholarship because they had canceled all the scholarships.
Right.
Yeah, so, those are those things that, that you kind of go, oh, that really happened.
Yeah.
But...
That's exactly why we do this, is to capture like those stories that people don't, we're so naive, I would say, like the younger generations, to really there's still discrimination, of course, but it was horrible in the 60s, 70s, and before then.
I grew up in Longview, and we
Yeah.
had 4 black families, and that was it.
Yeah.
And, I don't think I saw a grown black man until I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
And I went to Portland. And I was like, I've seen kids, but I'd never seen a grown black man.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is stupid. Why haven't I seen, this is crazy. Then I really woke up and went, there's no people of ethnicity in my state, in my city.
That's one thing we go through. You and I were just talking about this. To this day, with the Wrinkled Wisdom, people reach out and say, well, why don't you have more ethnicity in your podcast? And it's not lack of wanting them. It's because of the population ratio. It's very, very hard to find locally. And it's because,
There's some trust issues too, I think, probably.
Yeah, it's like, well, living in Florida when I was a kid, I lived in a neighborhood where we had all walks of life, and so I grew up that way in Florida because
Yeah.
they migrated more to the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's older and more developed. It's
Well,
been there
yeah.
longer.
I mean,
And
the
slavery was
density of
there.
the East Coast compared to the West Coast is just, you can't even,
Right. Did
you have to drive hours and hours, hours to get between cities in Portland on the West Coast. But back there, it's like, hour and a half here, hour and a half there.
Right. And did you have any eye-opening, do you remember any like significant scenarios where your eyes were open coming from the Northwest? Because you travel quite a bit.
Yeah,
That hit you?
Louisiana was a big one.
Yeah.
I'd never been in the South. This is my first gumbo tour. They called it the gumbo tour, and I flew into Houston and I met the other comic, and we went to the club that booked this tour. And they said, you got to go pick up your rental car. And it was like an ugly duckling rental car. That's what they called it. So it was a beater.
What year was this?
I'm going to say 1980. I think it was the first year I moved to LA, 86.
Oh, wow.
It's probably 86. And and he was from DC. And so he was driving the rental car, and we're coming through. You couldn't just go from Houston to New Orleans. You had to go through the parish roads. There was no like direct highway. I don't even know if there's this now, but you have to go up and then go through the parish roads down south. And we were going to go to Shreveport, and then we're going to do Lafayette, and then we're moving our way a little bit southeast. And it was November, because I remember this specifically because it was just before election time. And we're coming through this little town in Louisiana, and he's driving the car, and he's a white guy. He's a white Jewish guy. We're driving this white car, rides an old beater, and I'm in there. And we come through this little parish town, and all of a sudden, there's traffic. I went, what's the traffic? He goes, I don't know. He goes, and we're behind this like big school bus kind of a thing. I go, well, maybe there's a game or something. And we saw people starting to stand on the side of the road, and they're cheering and stuff. I go, oh, it must be homecoming or something like that. And they're having a parade for the kids. And we got through this, and we're going like 5 miles an hour behind, but there's no place else to go because we have to make a turn. And he goes, well, we'll just keep going. We didn't have GPS. We had maps. And so they get up and they make a left-hand turn. And in front of this bus is a whole row, like, 18, 20 guys all in white robes. It's the Klan.
Oh.
And the bus that we're following is full of Klan members. It's election time. And I go, and I remember looking at John, and he's like, his face has gone completely white now.
Right.
He goes, we got to get out of here. I go, no shit, sure. I go, let's just wave.
Yeah.
Because there was guys on the side of the road with guns.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, we got to get out of here. So we turn the corner, and we try to make our way and figure out how to get back to this road that we need. And that night, we had gotten to our club, and it was bizarre. We were staying at a Howard Johnson. Remember the old Howard Johnson?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Howard Johnson.
Howard Johnson. We were staying at a Howard Johnson.
Do they still have those in the South, I wonder?
I think they do. I remember that was the first time I ever saw drive-through daiquiris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they really were drive-through. It was really booze. I went, this is legal here?
Yeah.
But I went to the 7-Eleven that night, or a convenience store. And I drove the car down to the place, and I wanted to get something. And I go in, and I pick my stuff, and there was a guy in front of me, and I don't notice that he's a black man. It didn't faze me. And he was in front of me, and it was he was next. And the guy behind the counter looked at me, and he waved me up. I said, no, he was here first. That's fine. And he goes, ma'am. I said, no, it's okay. And the gentleman turned to me, is standing in front of me, and the fear on his face, I just froze.
Yeah.
And the guy pulled out a baseball bat from behind the counter. He goes, boy, if you don't let her go first, I'm going to beat your brains in. And I dropped my stuff on the floor. I took his stuff. I said, come on, we're going. He goes, I go, we're going, get out, come on. I'm taking you to the next door. You do not know.
Right.
I said, get in the car. He goes, ma'am, I go, get in the car and duck down. We're leaving.
Yeah.
He goes, you are in so much trouble. I said, I am not leaving you here.
Yeah.
I was shaking so bad for 2 days. I was so afraid. I dropped him at a corner, on a dark corner, and he kind of crawled out of the car.
Yeah.
And I said, if I put you in danger, I am so very sorry, but I couldn't leave you there.
Right. It's, even because I lived in Florida in the mid-90s, and I remember, I think I've told this story on this podcast before, but my mom worked at the children's department in Sears, and there was this younger girl. I think she was either at the end of high school or a little bit over high school. Her name was Lisa. She was a African-American girl, and she spent some time with my family. But I remember one time my mom telling me a story about where this older white lady had knocked something off a hanger, and Lisa had went to pick it up, and she was like, I won't have a touch of my stuff.
Oh my God.
And yeah, my mom did not take it kindly. And
we didn't grow up that way.
No, we didn't grow up that way. And that was when I was young. Luckily, the education system in Florida when I was young was very aware of racism, and we learned about it very young. And we didn't call people black; they were African American, Filipino. No, there was no racial slurs.
Yeah, you're welcome, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
It was my generation that taught you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually. I should round up some of my old elementary school teachers. They're probably your age.
Yeah.
And but it was such a great experience for me to learn about it, what people went through.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of like to get back down to Florida, is because I want those stories to get told for people to understand that it did exist. It probably still does exist. It still exists in places.
It's crazy.
And there's no reason for it. And it's
I'm going to make an addendum because I remember the year it was now, because the next night, it was 1989.
okay.
And I just shot my first television show, my first television shot at all was a national. And I bought shoes that were too tight for me because I love these shoes so much. And I waddled out on that stage. And I remember wearing those shoes at the show at Howard Johnson's. And there was I guess you're not supposed to say this. There was a woman of the night, let's put it that way, drunk on her butt, sitting in the front row. And she had her companion next to her.
Her temporary companion?
Yeah, the moment man. And she projectile vomited all over my new shoes. And I was just like, bitch, are you kidding me? Right. I was so mad. I remember that. And that was on that same tour. I saw wonderful things in Louisiana. I was there. I did that tour a couple times, and we went to New Iberia on a hoax. We had to take a detour because they were working on the road, and we ended up in New Iberia at Patou's, the original Patou's, which is one of the best Cajun restaurants in the world.
Patou's? It's called?
Patou's. Okay. And it started in New Iberia in this old home. And I went, we got to stop here. There's one in LA. Oh my God, this is such a great place. So we stopped. They were closed, but they were doing a tasting for their staff. And they said, come on in.
Oh, cool.
And I ate my first alligator.
Yeah. What'd you think?
Tastes like chicken.
Yeah.
I mean, with the Cajun spices, I couldn't really tell.
Right.
It was just, it was blackened, so whatever. But God, it was really that, and I was intrigued by. The Cajun culture.
Yeah.
I was really intrigued by the Cajun culture. I found them very, very interesting and very historically knowledgeable.
Yeah.
They knew. They could trace their ancestors back further than most white people would ever even try, because they had been told stories from A to B, from A to B, from A to B. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, they had some wrinkled wisdom in there.
Well, culture. They grew up with family. Back there, I will say in the South, family stays with family.
Yeah.
The old people grow old and they are taken care of by the family.
Yeah.
There was not and those traditions and those stories were passed down that way.
I love the Cajun. Do you ever go to Fort Lauderdale for any shows? If you ever get a chance on
Florida's a breeze, a Blair. I never liked Florida.
If you ever go to Fort Lauderdale,
From Washington, the highest place in Florida is a speed bump.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, there's no elevation in Florida.
Right.
I go, you guys, when this rains here, you're in big trouble here. But anyway, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you ever get a chance, check out Voodoo Bayou on the Riverwalk.
Okay.
I love Cajun culture. Probably because of what you're talking about. There's something fascinating about it because it's so different. But there's a reason that culture is represented in so many movies because of the fascination and the depth of it. I would say is just remarkable.
Well, it's a blend of three different kinds of ethnicity.
Yeah.
You know, you have the Dutch, you've got the French, you've got the East Islanders. I mean, and it's like, wow, and all these different things.
This is what happened.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, also in Jamaica, you get that too. You get that feeling of you are truly an outsider in Jamaica.
When you travel as a comedian and actress, what you experience so many different cultures. Have you found one that fascinates you more than others? Would it be like the Cajun culture, or do you love them all?
I love anybody that wants to tell me a story. I have had the one thing I can do now as an older woman, which is a lot of fun, and I suggest every older person do this, is you just put your hand up.
Yeah.
Because there will be so many men that will come up to me and think that I can handle a dirty racist joke or a racist joke or a misogynist joke.
Yeah.
And they'll start out and I go, no. And no. And they will not take no for an answer. And I'll just say, you need to step away.
Right.
And usually that's when the other male comics come in and go, pal, she said go away.
Right.
You know, but most of the time I get, there's no real ethnicity that I identify as somebody that, you know, I identify with or I enjoy. I love working assisted living, and I love working in those kind of situations because of the stories and that they have the best sense of humor.
Yeah.
You know, it's the sense of humor I grew up with.
Right.
You know,
that's probably my favorite part about your comedy is that it's so human. It's not.
Oh, thanks.
You know what I mean? It's like you have this story, like being in the doctor's office. Everybody's been in that doctor's office, but it's funny because their brains, like you're sitting in there with boredom and you've taken it to a level of creating humor out of the scenario. That is.
Yeah. Well,
it's great.
There's a thing that my mom and dad used to think I was insensitive.
Yeah.
But basically it's the comic brain and you can't shut it down.
Right.
And you look at stuff. We call ourselves, it's really funny because when I'm talking to another a comic and we'll go, oh, my best friend, he's a civilian, you know, that,
yeah.
and it's, you know, and I know what he's talking about because we have to monitor ourselves when we're talking to people that are not in our business or in our mindset. You have to monitor. I mean, you just have to monitor your thought and try to go, okay, no, you don't need to tag that, Susan. They're just trying to tell you a story.
Right.
You know, and it's not a conscious thing anymore, but it's, I grew up with a funny family and it was, you got to top somebody.
Yeah.
You have to top. I mean, my brother was hysterical. My sister was dry and funny. And my mom held court at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Like I came home from a date one night in college and there was 6 of my old boyfriends sitting around the table talking to my mom.
Yeah.
Just, you know, and she was just holding court and they were crying, laughing.
That was only half of your boyfriends, right?
Oh, no, I was very discerning, but you know, it was really funny because there was one of my sister's old boyfriends and there was like 3 of mine and then another pal that I later dated. And it was like, and my mother would make sandwiches. She'd drink beer. If they were old enough, they could have a beer and they would and they'd stay till 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Just laughing.
Yeah.
You know, and having a great time. And she was that person. And so I grew up with that around me.
Yeah.
And so there was not a competition, but there was a need to keep in the game.
Yeah.
so to speak, or you get left behind.
Do you run into, how's the transition been for you through 40 years of comedy with absorbing the younger generation coming up and enjoying it? Do you think they're missing, maybe there's a generation that's missing their
I have
grandparents?
a theory about it, and I think I'm probably right to some extent, is what we were talking about before is I grew up in a generation that came back from World War II. And my mom and dad were married in 1939. They went through World War II together. And my mother lost her first child. And there was all this, but you never left. You didn't leave. She didn't leave. She lived a block away from her mom and dad.
Yeah.
And because of that old Irish, no, I have to, this is my mom and dad. We'll take them with us if we go, that kind of thing. And so what I think now is people are more transient. Fathers have traveled for work. They've moved, kids have grown up in certain areas and then had to move because their dad had a different job in a different place. Or they haven't had that history in an area where the relatives live. They've had to travel to see their grandparents or whatever it is. So I think I represent something that they wanted. They wanted to have a grandma that lived, that recognized them for who they are.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. And I think, the world is a lot more transient, and there's two incomes in a family. There has to be two incomes in a family. My mom stayed home.
Yeah.
She should have worked because she was brilliant, but she wanted to, but she stayed home. And my dad was an architect, and he was amazing architect.
Yeah.
But he was in a little tiny city. He should have been in a bigger city.
Yeah.
But my mother wouldn't leave her mom and dad. So there's all these things that I see that I had that these kids didn't grow up with.
Yeah.
They didn't grow up with a lot of family around them. They were lucky if they had another cousin in town.
Right.
That kind of thing. And so I think I represent a grandma that they wish they could have seen more.
Yeah.
And I think that's lovely.
I would agree with that.
I think it's, and that's what when I first when Don't Tell blew up, first of all, you want to hear that story about Don't Tell?
Of course.
Well, we were talking about this earlier because I've been in the business for a long time, and I started in '83 in Portland, Oregon. Comedy had just hit the Pacific Northwest really late. Seattle got in at about 70, I guess the end of 78, and 1978. And Portland didn't really embrace it until 1982, middle of 82. And I got in March of 83. It had been it'd been at the Holy City Zoo since 75, and the Purple Onion in San Francisco.
Yeah, we know the Holy City Zoo. Our buddy Ben Grelly
Oh yeah,
did a show there. Yeah.
yeah. So so I got in, and there was more work than there was comics. So we moved fast. What was the question I was going for now? I can remember. I'm off on this. Oh, the Don't Tell thing. Okay,
Yeah.
So I went through the first boom. The first boom in comedy started about 1979, 80.
Okay.
And that's when comedy clubs started really popping up all over the country. And by the time I got in, there were well-established comedy clubs, big comedy clubs, 400-seaters in every major city in the country. And then they had these runs that you did that were the road, and every city you could think of anywhere wanted to have comedy because it was the new thing, and it was cheap.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of comedy in a short amount of time and build my set really fast. And because I was a woman and we were considered the freak show, I got a lot of work. People go, yeah, but they didn't hire women. I go, well, I had to take advantage of that
Yeah. Good for you.
because that put me on stage every night.
Yeah.
And that's how I built my set. That's how you learn. You have to just keep doing it. You can't read a book and know how to do stand-up. So anyway, so I'd gone through all this wonderful thing. I'd had my time. I did television. I did cable. I did all this stuff. I did ships. I did colleges. What a nightmare. And I did all this stuff. And I lived in LA for 13 years. And so when Don't Tell started, it was started by Kyle Kazazian Amory. I hope, Kyle, if you listen to this and I messed up your name, I'm so sorry. He's a very nice kid. He was going to UCLA, I think, and he was wanting to be a stand-up. But he was taking, he was getting ready to graduate. But he couldn't go out every night and do stand-up. So he started doing stuff at his, on the campus. And then raves, you guys know what raves are.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that was kind of the thing.
Don't tell my grandparents.
It was a sneak, everybody got a little secret thing. So he thought, let's have a secret comedy show and do it like a rave. But they wouldn't know who the comics are. We'll hire comics and tell them not to tell anybody.
Oh, that's cool.
And then then about 3 hours before, because you had the internet and everybody had internet and they had, their cell phones and they had their emails.
Yeah.
You signed up on an app. They created this app, Don't Tell Comedy. And people signed up for their city. And then you bought tickets online. And then 3 hours before the show, you were told where to go.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was BYOB. So I started doing a few of those in Portland, not knowing what the hell this was because it was the kids thing. And about November of 2023, I get an email, a phone call from the guy who runs the Portland Don't Tell shows. And he goes, listen, Suze, I want to submit you for taping. Because Don't Tell had then had a YouTube channel for a couple years.
Yeah.
And they were taping 10-minute sets and really actually opening up comedy to a different level, because up until that point, Dry Bar had come on board, but it was run by the Angel Network, which was not predominantly, they're Mormon.
They're Mormons, right, out of Salt Lake City?
And so it was you had to be squeaky clean. They monitored every word you said. And everybody go, oh, you have to do a Dry Bar. I go, I'll do Dry Bar when they call it Dry Vagina Bar. I am not doing it. I am not being censored by anyone at this age. I am not. And so anyway, Brent called and asked me my permission to go ahead. Brent Lowry, who was running Don't Tell, he just won the Seattle Laugh Off. And he says, I want to submit you. And I said, no. He goes, Suze, why? And I said, because this isn't my time. This is your time now. Oh. I've had my time. I've had my boom. I just want to stay working, doing little corporate shows, staying on stage. I'm happy. I'd retired from a day job that was the best day job in the whole world. They would let me go do stand-up whenever I wanted for as long as I wanted, and came back and I still had health insurance. Yeah. And I still had a job. They were wonderful. Hannah Anderson I worked for them for 18 years. And I came on. Yeah, 18. Yeah.
The production company?
No, it's Children's Clothing.
I'm thinking of Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, no, it's Children's Clothing Company.
Okay.
And she was a woman, owned it and ran it, and she was so progressive. She hired single moms, and she put in a daycare downstairs so their kids could come to work with them.
Isn't that awesome?
It was amazing. I mean, she created micro economic facilities in Peru and stuff for women to sell their goods. But it was really amazing. She was an amazing person, and I worked for her, and it was an amazing place to work. But anyway, so these kids had already, this was their time. The internet had changed comedy. And Kyle and Don't Tell were really changing it, because they were giving people a chance. It would have to do years and years and years to get somebody to try to notice and do a special for them, or they'd have to pay for their own special or whatever. It's impossible to build time. So they said, no, 10-minute sets. Yeah. And finally, he called again and he said, listen, I just submitted you. I grabbed a video off your YouTube channel. He says, Suze, don't be mad at me. I think they're going to love you. I go, honey, I'm too old. Yeah. I appreciate your kindness, but I'm too old. They're never going to take me. The oldest person I've seen on that show is probably almost 50. Yeah. Well, they called and asked me to do a November show. And I said, no, I can't do it. He told me you would say no. I go, no, I can't do it. I have a corporate gig. I've got a contract. He goes, oh, oh, you're working. I go, yeah, I'm what you would call a working comic. Yes. Yes. There's a thing called a professional comic. That's what I've been. So anyway, and he laughed. So I did January 20th to 24.
Yeah.
And then I went in and had my first knee replacement in February. And on March 11th, they sent me the video to edit the day I was coming out of anesthesia. I go, we're going to have to wait on this one for a while. And then I edited the tape and sent him back the cuts. And on March 11th, my life blew up.
Nailed it.
It blew up.
Is it wild to think about the progression of technology and how it's assisted in comedy? Like,
it hit on a Tuesday, and by Friday I had 5 million views.
Isn't that wild?
I was with my clips and it was unbelievable.
Does it make you feel so? I got to think about how that makes you feel, like internally. I'm trying to think of the word it would be, but it probably humbles you in a sense, but also you feel so much value. Like,
you have no idea. I mean, everybody kept saying, "You're viral." I kept saying, "I've been telling you should stay away from me for years." Yes.
Yeah.
They had to go, "No, you're viral." Oh, God, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And so, and then America's Got Talent called.
Oh.
About a week and a half later, and asked me if I wanted to do an audition in front of. Now, this is not my first time with AGT.
Right.
America's Got Talent. We've gone around for several years, and the hoops that I didn't want to jump through all the hoops, and I said, well, to be honest, thank you very much, but I'm not jumping through those hoops. He goes, no, you'll be in front of the celebrity judges. You don't have to go through all the other process. And I said, well, I don't know. He says, well, the truth is that we're coming to the end of the season, and we might not be able to get you in on this season. Would you do next season? And I said, no.
Yeah.
And he goes, why? And I said, I'm 72 years old. You don't put shit off.
Right.
You want me, you got to find me a spot, pal, because I'm not waiting around for anything.
Yeah, clock is ticking.
And he laughed. He goes, okay, I'll do my. So they got me a spot.
Yeah.
And I shot my audition in front of the judges on April 5th of 24.
Okay.
And that was
it
interesting.
Fun?
You want to hear that story?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question first of all? Did it feel, I would describe it as icky when you work with a company like that? I've always wondered. It feels so.
No. Well, I know the game.
Yeah.
I lived in LA for 13 years, and I've been down that road. The people that you work with are wonderful. The production people all those kids are just brilliant and smart and quick. And one of the reasons that is a well-oiled machine is because of those kids.
Yeah.
And they're all, it's a stepping stone for them. And I get that because but, and I was with, the guy that was my handler was 27 years old. He was just a great guy. And there was a reason I didn't make the live show. You go down and you do, if you get in front of the celebrity judges, they had so many slots to be on live TV.
Right. And
there's 55 slots for that. And they pass through probably about 250 people.
Yeah.
So last year's there was a lot of people that could pull flaming bunnies out of their ass. Yeah. And I wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was aerial artists and people driving their bicycles down it was crazy. And they also hire people, which is kind of mean, that they know that they're going to boo and they're going to kick off.
Yep.
And that's part of show business.
Right. That's what I was wondering.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
And you get to know these kids and you just want to go. They brought a guy in from Arkansas that was a YouTuber. No, he was a TikToker.
Oh, okay.
And he had like 5 million followers or something like that.
Right.
And he had this big porn star stash and a mullet. And I asked him what he did. You do these little chats. They film all this stuff.
Yeah.
He says, we want you to talk to this guy. He's the other comic. I go, oh, okay. So I went over and they're starting to film this. He goes, you just stand here and we'll just get this. And you guys just talk about comedy together. I go, okay. So he's just standing there smiling at me. So I went, okay, I'll start, So where are you from? I'm from Arkansas. I said, well, okay, great. I go, did you come by yourself? He goes, no, I brought my wife with me. I said, oh, that's great. I said, you're a stand-up? He goes, well, I'd like to be. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, well, do you do stand-up? He goes, no, I have I got a TikTok channel with 5 million followers. And I said, interesting. What kind of comedy do you do on your TikTok?
Yeah.
He goes, I kind of give compliments. Huh. Well, I was figuring, I didn't know what he meant by that, So I was like, oh, okay, I'll follow you on TikTok. I'll go, Well, he couldn't say that. He's kind of he's a sleazeball.
Yeah.
And he goes, you're so pretty, I could eat you for, this kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, he's a misogynist.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh my, but, he's got 5 million, 14 pubescent boy, followers. And that's kind of the deal. But I was embarrassed, but I liked him a lot. We started talking afterwards and hung out with his wife. He's a really nice guy. And his wife is lovely. He'd worked for FedEx. And this is a big shot. He's real excited. Yeah. I said, you're going to go out there and you've never been on stage before? He'd never been on stage.
It was all just on his phone or whatever, shooting it on the internet.
Yeah, he'd shot it, but it was just, he'd never been in front of a live audience. And he's going to do this in front of 1,200 people.
Yeah.
And he had skates that on his shoes, like the kids do.
The Heelys.
The Heelys.
Yeah.
And he had the big porn mustache, and he dressed real sleazily, and he insulted Sofia Vergara right off the bat. That was his thing, and they gonged him.
Oh, I bet.
And he thought he was going to win. He thought he was going to walk out of there with $1 million.
Yeah. And
he told me he'd quit his FedEx job that he'd worked at for 10 years, and he had kids.
I'm sure he's doing okay on TikTok now. They keep it
know.
going. 5 million followers.
I was just like, no, you didn't quit your day job. He goes, oh, yeah. I go, what? I was so nervous for him. I sat backstage going, oh, my God, I'm so nervous for him. And I was. And he came back out, and he was devastated, and I was pissed.
Yeah.
That's when I went, okay, this is exactly the gut feeling I've had the whole time.
Gross.
And now my experience was the same day.
Yeah.
And I had begged them not to do, they wanted me to do the stuff that I did on Don't Tell. And I said, yeah, but that's already out there. He goes, well, they approved this. This is what they approved. They want this stuff. Yeah. So I had to do 2 minutes. Really hard for a comic to do 2 minutes.
Right.
I said, okay, I'll do the best I can in 2 minutes. So I had it down. But I walked out on stage, and there's a point, you have to hit the mark. It's in front of this star thing. And the minute I walked out of the stage, the audience exploded. And then they stood up.
And they were jacked.
And I scared the holy bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? Why are they standing up? What's going on? I kept looking behind me thinking somebody was behind me.
Right.
And I get to the star, and all the judges are turned around looking at the audience going, what's going on? And this guy in the middle of the theater, now this is a big ass theater, 1,200 people, it's packed. Stands up in the middle of the theater, goes, we love you, Susan. I'm just standing there with my eyes like this going, I love you too.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on right now. They'd all seen the Don't Tell.
Yeah.
And you could see Simon Cowell's face just kind of went. I went, oh no, this isn't going to go well. So they had Howie interview me, and I have been in the same circles with Howie Mandel.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I've known of it. He started a little bit later. He was like in '86, and he's Canadian. And so he'd been discovered in Canada and came down to the States. And he's looking at me going, I don't know what you do. Now here's this fat little old gray-haired lady waddling out on stage. And when I say waddle, I got a bad knee and I'm slow. And he goes, I don't know what you do. And I said, well, you should. I've been doing it longer than you have.
Yeah. Oh, I bet they lit up.
And the place just went crazy. And he went, oh. I went, yeah, hi. And he interviews me and gets a laugh. And Simon finally cracks a smile. And then I started my little skits and sketches. And it wasn't the strongest set because the whole audience had already seen it.
Right. So the shock factor is kind of lost
it's like,
a little bit.
And I'm really aware of this, and this is all so new to me. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I finished strong, but anyway, and the place went crazy. And so it goes to Heidi Klum, who, you just want to mess her hair up. And oh my God, it's just like, oh, you're very funny. Really? Tell your face. And so Sophia Viara, who is very funny.
Yeah.
She's very funny and she's beautiful. She goes, oh my God, you are so funny. I go, well, thank you.
And I go,
and then it got to Simon Cowell. And I'm going, okay, here we go. And I'm not going to take it shit.
Yeah.
I'm really not. I don't care that much about this now because it's been explained to me what's going to happen if I make it in. And the comic had never won.
Right.
Maybe once. I think Tom Cotter came close. Anyway, so I said, he says, well, when you came out here, all I could think of was, oh my God, here comes an act.
Yeah.
And I go, no, this is it.
This is the real deal.
If I could do it any differently, I would. But this is what you get. And he says, it's interesting because this is where I noticed, there had been these 4 little boys, probably 13, 14 years old, that had probably stood in line for an hour and a half outside to be the first in line to get in.
Yeah.
So they could run down the aisle and get in the seats next to Simon Cowell because then they'd be on film.
Oh.
Smart little kids.
Yeah.
And they were sitting right next to him. And he said, I think you are probably kind of unique because I was not only watching you, I was watching these young kids next to me, and one of them laughed so hard he fell out of his chair.
Yeah.
He says, you kind of cross generations. And I said, how lucky am I?
Yeah.
And he said, but I think you're probably kind of naughty. And I said, well, you would know.
Yeah.
And I was just like, but it was very sweet because these are the first kids. They were standing in their chairs.
Yeah.
Screaming and yelling. And I thought, how lucky am I?
Yeah.
I don't have to go on to the next live show. I don't have to be passed on. This was worth, I have a career. I'm okay.
Yeah.
But this was so lovely. And it just kind of, I said, okay, maybe I can still be relevant. And that's what you have to do with older people is you have to let them know that they are still relevant.
I just got goosebumps. That is exactly why we do this podcast, because I think that social media now is representing the older generation in a way that they've never been able to be represented before. And it's also touched, like we were talking about how people were transient. So many kids now don't get to grow up around their grandparents or that generation.
No.
They've missed out on so much that I hope they get the opportunity to catch up with. And that's why we do this.
When I did my Don't Tell, it was in Santa Barbara. It was raining cats and dogs, which is that's a phrase nobody knows anymore. And so I was nervous because I was following Derek Strope, wonderful comic. If you get a chance to look him up on YouTube,
we will.
He's wonderful. young, funny as hell.
Do you know him?
One of the best comics. And I mean, I was on,
Strope?
you know who was on my show? Kyle Kinane was on my show. I know Kyle and I are now friends. I mean, we're dear friends, but I was up against really strong young comics.
Yeah.
And I had my best friend she's been a stand-up. She married a stand-up. She was a stand-up for years. She's my best friend. She knows comedy inside and out. And she was with me. And I looked over and I went, I have to follow that.
Yeah.
And I was like, there was the MC, then it was Derek Strope, and who just blew the audience up. I'm going, oh my God. And you never go in and try to match that energy at the beginning. You just can't. If you do, you're just cutting your throat. So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And the MC, he'd come off and the place just erupted, and the MC goes up and he starts doing a couple little minutes in between, and then he starts to bring me up, and I'm standing on the side waiting to go up. And there was a little 20-something young woman sitting about 2 seats in from me, within earshot. And I'm standing there, and she looks over at me, and she looks at her friend, and she goes, oh my God. And I just looked at her and I go, yeah, watch this, bitch. And I went on stage. That's what I needed.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but the angels gave me that because I needed to go, okay, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I had to be reminded that way because I was in an absolute panic.
Yeah.
And so my angel stepped in and said, no, you got this.
Here's your sign.
And it was really interesting to have that. But here's the best part of that story is that after the show, she was the first one in line to ask for a hug.
Yeah.
And to apologize to me.
Do you love the hugs? I bet that.
I've always gotten hugs from the day my old roommate, the gal that was with me that day, she said, if they want to ever talk about who you are, you're the most huggable comic in the business. Nobody asked my husband for a hug.
That says so much.
And I said, I guess I am a familiar.
Yeah.
That's who I am. I am a familiar. And people feel that they need to let me know how much they love me. So they give me a hug.
Yeah.
But your generation and younger ask permission.
Yeah.
Boomers just come in.
Dive in.
And I have to go, no, there's a space. Guys.
Yeah.
Guys will go, oh, God.
I was going to ask you about that. I was wondering, on the hug thing, I never thought about a hug as much as I have in the last couple years because I'm a big Disney fan. I'm big into dreaming and imagination and things.
Yeah.
And I just had learned that the rule that Walt Disney had for the characters was the child lets go first because you don't know how much the child needs that hug.
Exactly.
And hugs are so much more to me since I ever heard that. Because you don't think about it. People do it in gesture, but then you think about it. And I imagine with you where you go around the country and perform for people and you give them something that they're starving for, whether they know it or not, laughter and, humor in life. But to get a hug from that person has to mean that you dove into something deep in that individual.
And the best part about it is because I am the age I am, I recognize the need. It's just not a perfunctory thing.
Yeah.
It's because they need that and I'm there to give it to them. And that is such an honor in my life.
Yeah.
That it can end tomorrow. But as long as I know that I've given a hug to somebody that had just lost their grandma.
Yeah.
Or a hug to somebody that just never had that humor around them. Or whatever it is that they need. I got all these DMs and that's a message from in the Instagram.
Yeah.
I had to be told.
That's how we connected. Yeah.
Yeah. But from a 14-year-old girl. And she said, I know this is kind of weird for you to get an email from somebody like me, or a DM from somebody like me. I'm 14 years old and I want to tell you, you saved my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And I went on and she said, I hate school. I get bullied all the time. I'm not pretty. I'm fat. I hate myself. I just want to die. And I came in and I was scrolling my phone and your video popped up and I started laughing so hard. I just wanted to let you know that you probably saved my life. I started I was weeping
You're
when
gonna
I was
make me
reading
bawl.
it, and I'm choking up thinking about it. And I thought, I was a fat kid and I know what she's going through. And I said, I know your parents have told you this, and if they haven't, this is temporary. You have to just put your head down, get through it, and head for anything that gives you joy outside of drugs. Do not go that way.
Yeah.
I said, and you make the people laugh. You have a sense of humor. And I said, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate this note, and I'm going to keep it. It's in my saved file. And when I'm feeling crappy, I'm going to read it again. Now go do your homework. And she sent me back, and she started playing with me. She goes, that meant really, I didn't think you'd ever respond to me, and that's really nice, but isn't it late? Shouldn't you be in bed?
Right.
and I thought, she wants to banter, so I knew that the kid was going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, what an honor.
Has there any, we think of saving somebody's life, we in the Hollywood or anything else, it's like when they do CPR, you pull somebody out of a burning car. That's what we see. People never think about the emotional attachment or just the communication, that communication and relationship of like personalities can save some. You're the second comedian that we've had in the short amount of time we've been doing this say that people have reached out to them and said that. And it's
especially in this time.
It's incredible.
I had a lot of hugs last night. I had a lot of people because I now voice.
Think about the people that don't message you that you saved.
I don't know about that. Well,
there's got to be.
I had an older group. The late show last night, I had an older group of people, and they were my age and older. And there was this very cute couple. They'd probably been married, I'm going to say close to 60, maybe 70 years. They were up there. They're in their late 80s. And I made a point of going over and thanking them because it really was late. I got off stage around 11:30.
Yeah.
And I was hurting. I was hurting bad. And I went over and they were just cute as a button. And I handed her one of my bags. And I says, I don't want you to buy a bag. I want to thank you for coming out to my show. I know this is a late show, and I don't know why you bought tickets to this show, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And she says, oh, my husband just loves you, and I love you too. We've been married for forever. And I said, is he a good one? She goes, he's a great one.
Yeah.
I thought, if I hadn't stopped to talk to them, I wouldn't know that they held hands. They do all the things that I talk about my mom and dad doing. And it was just such a joy to talk to them. And, but I also had the kids. There was a lot of young kids in that audience.
Is that awesome? That's got to be so incredible to sit up there and see the diversity in the crowd. Because it
is fun.
You're in a unique position where you're so vibrant and your personality is so, it like transcends generations, right? Not very many people can do that.
I didn't know that, but yes, I do know it now.
I can tell you because I sat in the living room watching your show, your YouTube special, and my mom comes and helps me with my mom's in her 60s. And then I have my girlfriend and me and my daughter. And even though, some of the words come out, but my daughter understands like that's life. You're going to hear words, Well, and we were all laughing. And the thing is, you sat there, like you're in so many living rooms right now. Oh, God, even probably
no pressure.
as we speak, there's a good chance that you're in somebody's living room right now, giving them a great time. And what a great thing to think about. And
don't think about it. Can't think about it.
I'm thinking about it.
It's lovely. It's lovely for you to say that.
Well, because I've experienced it, I think, and that's why it's sitting, here with you in person is just so. It's remarkable to me that we live in a time where we get to connect and, we get to share the joy that we get from each other, just through comedy and media. And it's really remarkable, I think, what's coming up probably for you and for everybody else getting the opportunities to enjoy your stuff. And in multiple ways.
Thank you.
It's so
I have a theory about people my age and around my age and a little younger than that, in their 40s, 50s, still have the same database reference that I know. I can mention a cartoon and they remember it.
yeah.
I talk about it. I talk about a Wile E. Coyote. I have a reference to Wile E. Coyote. You have no idea the blank stares I get from Gen Zs. Yeah. They're just like, who's that? And that happened when I was shooting my half an hour for Don't Tell. There was this young girl in the front row, and she was just like, I went, do you know who Wile E. Coyote is? No. I said, we grew up with funny cartoons.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not Mel Brooks. Oh God. Thank you. I mean, Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes, Merry Medleys. I mean, Foghorn Leghorn, please.
Yeah.
You know, he was W.C. Fields. That's who he was. They took characters from the silent movies and from the early 30 movies and made these wonderful cartoons with some of the best writers in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, and that's why I think I'm having this resurgence with young people because they've never experienced that humor.
Yeah. I would agree.
And I'm animated on stage because I grew up with Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball, yeah.
And I would go in and I would practice that eyebrow. I was in front of that mirror 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because I loved Lucy. I truly loved Lucy.
Yeah, it was a great show.
I found out she had died. I was on stage in Amarillo, Texas. And somebody passed a note to me on stage and said Lucille died. Lucille Ball died. And I just broke into tears on stage. I was just, she was such an influence on women in this country.
Right.
That, she and Carol Burnett.
Yeah, Carol Burnett.
I mean, when you ask Seinfeld or Paul Reiser or any of those guys, even Jay Leno, who's your favorite comedian? Yeah. Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett was closer to a stand-up than Lucille Ball ever was. But I met Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers. And Joan Rivers was probably one of the most powerful women writers. I mean, she was prolific.
Yeah.
And she had this whole wall and this whole wall in her office was filled floor to ceiling with card boxes. She wrote every single set down and then she wrote every single joke down and she chronologically put, if you wanted a story about a guy riding a bike, she pull it out.
Off the wall.
She'd pull it out and she would do that. She would read it and go, I'm doing this that night. Right into her 80s, she did this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a legacy.
Yeah, I was kind of think of, oh my gosh, why is it my mind drawn a blank? The girl that sang Animal Crackers. What's her name?
Shirley Temple.
Shirley Temple. So my daughter, Hadley, if you ever get to meet her.
That's one for me, right?
Yeah.
I get one for me.
That was the whole thing, is like, even now that, like, she is still prominent in videos for kids, like probably
it was wholesome. It was very wholesome.
Very wholesome, yeah.
And they showed. What's the dancer? Not Bojangles. It was what is his name? The wonderful tap dancer that tapped with her.
Oh, my mom
and
would
Little
know.
Princess and a few other. I mean, they had black actors in her films with lines.
Yeah.
And she was one of the first ones that they filmed with black actors that they gave lines to. And that was just as right after Gone with the Wind, when Hattie McDaniels was actually nominated for an Academy Award. I mean, Shirley Temple crossed all kinds of barriers.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys were really, really, really amazingly progressive.
I think, do you ever think about your impact that you're, being a dad of girls, I have so much respect for the women that have paved the way. Like, we're on the time, like, we live in the time right now that women have paved the way. The asphalt's there,
I'll start
and you've given the
crying this one.
opportunity to so many kids and young girls.
Let
Do
me
you think
tell you
about
something.
that?
I get more angry, and I'll tear up on this one because this happens now, and I lost it the other night on stage, and I don't usually lose it, but the country's under attack right now,
Yeah.
and we are in trouble, and women are the target. We are one of the biggest targets, and they are trying very desperately to shut us up and to take our rights away, all kinds of rights. And your daughters need to be protected. And I grew up with this. I grew up with a mother who couldn't have a checking account.
Right.
We didn't have credit cards till 1973. You couldn't have a checking account till 1973. I grew up fighting for the ERA. I grew up with Gloria Steinem. I grew up with fighting for Vietnam. But in the long run, we were told, fighting for our body autonomy was such a big moment and big chunk of my 20s.
Yeah.
And I have a line in my show that I don't do politics in my show. Because I'm there, I want to be there to heal. I don't want to be there to cause anxiety in anybody. But I do have one line that came out of my mouth because I feel so strongly about it. And I had a whole group of young women. It's a line where I say, I don't have any children. I don't have kids that I know of. And I get a laugh. I said, well, the 80s are a little hazy. And I used to have another tag for that. But the line, but back then at least we had a choice.
Right.
And I had a whole group of 20-somethings groan at me.
Yeah.
I will take your disdain. I will take your silence. I will not take your groan.
Right.
I don't have to take your groan. I've earned more than that. And I lost my shit.
Oh, really?
I turned to them and I said, you don't get to groan at that. What you should be saying to me is thank you.
Right.
I said, how dare you? Do you know what you're facing? None of you have had children, but some of you may be forced to. I just went off. I said, I don't care if you choose not to have an abortion. I want you to have a choice.
Right.
You should have a choice. Whatever your religious beliefs are, you should be able to choose. No, we're not trying to stop you or regulate you. We're trying to give you a voice.
Yeah.
And I just lost my shit. And I had one of the girls come up after the show and she goes, I'm really sorry. And I said, apology accepted, but I want you to think about what I said to you.
Yeah.
And I said, if you have a question, why don't you go ask your mom or your grandmother if you still have them? Because you're going to find out just how much we fought for. And your daughters too. I mean, I think this is something that we need to say because, every nation in this world, every democratic nation, we're the only major democratic nation that's never had a woman leader.
Right.
The rest of them have. And we don't want to scare men, but we just want a place at the table.
Right.
It's not rocket science. But anyway, so obviously I feel very strongly about it, but I have to keep it out of my act.
Yeah.
Because I am there. I'm a healer. And I don't heal people by yelling at them.
That's what's nice about having like the opportunity to sit down and do. I think that's what's neat about podcasts now is people get to step out of their act and tell their personal beliefs. And it's getting more people, it's getting more of an audience to get more diverse information, right?
Yeah.
Compared to now where you're stuck on the mainstream news or anything like that, is you're giving people the opportunity to have the conversations. Because one thing you have to, like being a dad of girls, is I'm not a girl. So you have to go talk to women that have lived through their life, the older, the younger, and everything, to get a perspective. And I learn something every time that I hope makes me a better father. And it's important for people to get
it is. And I don't leave men out of this because men have faced scrutiny and also pressures you didn't grow up with the draft. My generation, generation grew up with the draft. That was a pressure that young men, they got to 18 in 1960s.
Yeah.
And there was a big gulp. There was a big rock in there. They're going, oh my God, what do I do? And from a small town, we lost a lot of young men.
I can tell you,
and the men that came back were not the same.
Yeah. So I've said this before on this podcast because it's an important lesson for me to tell people that, especially younger men. One time, my grandpa ended up being very successful, and we had a farm and a logging company, and we were out working one time. This is not maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and my grandpa and I were out in the farm doing some irrigating, I think. And my phone, there's no cell service up there by Mount Adams. You know where?
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and I just happened to get some text messages and some emails from some people, and I think one of them was work. And I told my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, you're lucky you didn't grow up now where people can just demand something of you or
right.
And I don't know if he looked at me, but I felt like he looked at me. That when he said this, it feels like he was staring into my eyes.
He was dealing with the anger in his head, but the love that he feels for his grandson. That's what he's dealing with all at one time. Yeah.
He said, I don't think so, little David. He said, when I was a kid, I never knew if I was going to be able to have a family. I would, like those kids,
it hung over the head.
Yeah, those men, and they would go in. I always think about this. They went into war. They would sign up. Because they knew the draft was coming, they would sign up instead with their best friend. So they got to choose who they went to war with and died next to.
Yeah.
And maybe get a chance of deciding if they wanted to be in the Navy or the Army or something, right? And I think about that, but also I think about the men weren't the only victims of that. You got to think at times there was men that had families and the wives were subject to the draft too. Not necessarily physically, like with their bodies being harmed, but so many of them lost the love of the life and the father of their children.
Yeah, and women were not in their power at that time,
right?
And
we hear that
jobs
often.
were not. They weren't. There was truly a glass ceiling. But yeah, this is what I tell the kid. This is things that when I do a young podcast with young kids, they go, "What would you tell us?" And I said, "If you have a grandparent, you got to ask questions.
Yeah.
Don't wait. The clock is ticking on your grandparents' memory. And you need to know their history. You need to know this. This is something you need to know. Your daughters need to know, what it was like when you were growing up, what their grandfather went through, these kind of things. I lost my mom very young, and my dad was World War II, but my dad didn't get to go in. He was going to go in as an officer. He had 4 years of ROTC in college. And 2 weeks before he was supposed to report, my mother noticed they hadn't been married very long. They got married in 1939, and Pearl Harbor happened, and he was going in, and he was urinating about once every half hour, and she just didn't understand, and he was hungry all the time. She says, "You have to see the doctor." He didn't want to go back to the doctor. He didn't want to go to the doctor because he knew something was wrong, and he wanted to go to war. So the doctor came over for dinner.
Those days.
And he said, "No, you're going to have to come into the office." And he had contracted, here again, the angel stood there, and he had contracted diabetes, type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
And he didn't go to war. And he was a patriot, because back then we'd been attacked.
Yeah.
The country was mobilized and was all on one side. Vietnam was a different story.
Right.
And so those are the stories that need to be told, because the difference between World War II and Korea.
Yeah.
Korea was iffy.
Right.
Korea probably shouldn't have happened, but they still had those soldiers that still God and country. So even though we barely squeaked through that one,
right.
Vietnam, there was writing on the wall from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I encourage, I want kids to ask, and I've told my nieces and my nephews, if you want to know stuff about me, you got to ask me now.
Right.
I'm not just going to volunteer it.
Yeah.
I have to know what you want to hear. So and they're really good about that.
Good.
You know,
Do you think it's coming back around with your interaction with the youth? Do a lot of people, do you feel it, the change from, well, I mean, obviously it's hard because when you started comedy, you know, you were in your, let's say, late 30s, right? I'm trying to do the math here.
I was 31.
31, so young 30s. So now you're getting to the age of where people, you know, you're able to touch people way younger than you that were born, let's say, when you started.
Or even way after.
Or after.
Yeah.
And they probably just have do you see the
They're
appreciation?
fascinated by the business back then because they did grow up watching Robin Williams and and you know all the movies and all the stuff like that. They grew up with those, you know, watching Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy movies. I grew up with the raw Eddie Murphy, who was, I mean, he was some great stories there. But anyway, and I've had a lot of I've been privy to and had the chance to meet and work with some really big names and really wonderful comics.
Yeah.
But I think the youth, they're kind of rediscovering what I call old school comedy.
Yeah.
You know, I will turn people on to Buddy Hackett.
Yeah.
Go watch Buddy Hackett. Go YouTube him.
Yeah.
And they come back, oh my God, he's so funny. I go, yeah.
That's
Jonathan Winters. Jack Parr handed Jonathan Winters, first time on ever television that they ever did this. He was Jonathan Winters sitting on Jack Parr Tonight Show. And Jack Parr handed him a stick. If you ever get a chance to see it on YouTube, go.
We will.
Jonathan Winters and Jack Parr hands him a stick. They couldn't cut to commercial because Jonathan Winters did so much with this stick, this one stick.
Yeah.
That was, and Jack Parr was rolling on the floor, wiping his eyes. He was laughing so hard, couldn't catch his breath. His audience, people late at night watching this, they were just howling. The whole thing just, the next morning, the network phones just lit up, you know, and Jonathan Winters was a star.
Yeah.
I mean, he handed him a stick and he did 9 characters.
Yeah.
With one stick. That's brilliance.
Prop comedy is something that I wonder if it'll come back because, you know, like Carrot Top does it.
Yeah.
And then Gallagher did it. Gallagher? Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The last
2 of
place
my
I think he
faves.
performed was in Spokane. I think at Joker's Comedy Club. But do you think there's...
You ever had to follow Gallagher on a stage after he'd done his crap?
You did it?
Oh, yeah.
Was it a mess?
Oh, yeah. I was so angry. I walked on stage. They called me on a Sunday night at Harvey's in Portland. They said, Gallagher won't do Sunday nights. Can you come in and headline? I said, sure. I go in. They'd had clean. They'd spent $5,000 having the place cleaned after his act. I walked on stage. He had poured honey all over the stage. My shoes came off my feet. Yeah. I went to grab the mic stand and my hand would not release. They couldn't get the crap off the stuff. I was like,
never again.
Why would you hire this guy for an indoor show?
Right.
Oh my God. He should have had to carry his crap out with him. People had to wear garbage bags.
In the front rows.
3 rows back.
Yeah.
It was insane.
I think you're talking about like the old, where we at?
Oh, we got to go. We got to go.
We got to go. Yeah. I know you gave us one piece of advice. I always ask somebody for a piece of advice. Younger generation, you gave us one nugget. Is there anything else you would like to tell the younger generation or even your generation?
Stay open.
Yeah.
Stay open to different ideas. I'm making a list of all the words I've had to learn from your generation and younger because I was called an OG.
Yeah.
You
are an OG.
Ron Funches, who's a dear friend of mine, he's started in Salem and Portland, Oregon, and he's a great comic. And he has this great podcast, and it, you know, it's listened to by millions of people. But he referenced me. He goes. Well, somebody said, "Oh, Ron, there is no real comics in Portland," And he goes, oh, I beg to differ with you.
Yeah.
Susan Rice is OG. And I thought he meant old gal.
Yeah.
I was really pissed. I went, damn it, Ron, I didn't deserve that. And I texted him, I go, okay, why did you call me an old gal?
Yeah.
And he goes, I didn't. I called you OG. I go, yeah, old gal. He goes, no, it's old gangster.
Yeah,
I went,
original gangster.
Yeah, original gangster or something like that. I went, oh.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, okay, I have to start learning this verbiage. Somebody asked me to be on a cis show. And I thought, oh, it's a gal show. How fun.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll do it. But who's on it? And I go, what gals are doing it? And he goes, you. And I go, well, it's called the cis show. And they go, yeah. I go, what does that mean? And I still don't know exactly what it means. I don't know what it means, but it's about being a single white woman. I don't know what this stands for. What's that stand for?
I don't know what cis is.
Cis.
What I hear from the kids is sus. We'll be driving around, they'll be like,
Maybe
that guy's
that's
sus. And I'm like a suspect?
Suspicious. Yeah. Yeah, that's on my list. But I got cis. I don't know what that is.
Have you heard Riz?
Yeah, Riz.
Well, I think we did Riz when we were in the 90s. But
I have a 14-year-old nephew that I have to text him and go, what does this mean?
Yeah.
What does this mean? And he'll tell me. And of course, he makes fun of me. But I go, I have to. He's my grandnephew. And I go, I got to know this stuff. I got to know what I'm being called.
Do you know what gyat is?
No. I know what's goat is greatest of all time. And I thought they'd call me an old goat.
So I thought gyat, well, like GYAT was get your act together.
Yeah.
But apparently the kids are telling me that it means she's gyat a big butt. We got to figure that out.
Oh, well, that's kind of rude.
Is that what it is?
Is that one got?
Gyat, I guess.
Oh my God.
See, I'm
learning this
stuff.
Yeah,
me too.
So don't be afraid of asking. If somebody calls you something to my generation, just ask them, what the hell are you talking about? Tell me what that means, because I don't want to, don't make the old people in your life feel irrelevant, because maybe it's not. Maybe we're not just up on all technology, but
right.
We know how to spell.
That's right.
And we know how to write cursive.
And you're the OGs.
And we know, we know how to turn our computers on.
Some of you. I got to get my grandma.
Don't put us in a category until, we deserve it.
I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, I really, really appreciate you answering my message months ago and staying in contact. And
I said no the first time, a couple times.
Well, you said you were busy.
And
I told you that I would check up on your shows and get together with you. I appreciate that you carry the same values that we do about making sure that your generation gets represented. And I have to say, what you're doing is probably more appreciated than by the younger generation.
Watch Andy Huggins too. Andy Huggins.
We talked to Andy. We're talking about getting him on the podcast if we can.
Wonderful. Yeah, Andy and I have known each other off and on over the. He's a comic from.
He was on AGT.
He was what they called the Outlaws from Houston.
Okay.
And they're big drinkers. I knew of Andy for years. And we just shot our own Don't Tells.
Oh, okay.
I did a Friday night in San Diego. He did Saturday night in San Diego, and he was at the same hotel. And I walked up to him and I go, "Hi, Andy, how are you?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Susan Rice." He goes, "Oh my God." I go, "How are you?" He goes, "I'm tired. How are you?" I go, "Me too. I'm tired." Anyway, he's a lovely man and he's very funny.
Good. Yeah, we've talked to him and we hope to get him on the podcast. I'd be so excited to sit down with him. And I got to say, I appreciate that you put in the level of effort you do too to make people smile and laugh.
Oh, thanks a lot. You guys are very sweet. Yeah. Have a good. We've gone on and on. You're going to be editing forever. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. We'll see you tonight.
Okay.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks a lot.